We use hand gestures in almost every part of our life, whether we're talking amongst our friends, to ourselves, or to a group full of people. The question then becomes, how important do we think they are? Two students from the University of Colorado took this upon themselves and decided to interview 23 people. They split these people into two groups, those who could use hand gestures and those who couldn't. They were to pull this off by having them sign a consent form that they would have electrodes attached to them. These electrodes were either going to be attached to their wrists or their ankles. After having their hands tied or their ankles tied, depending on where the electrodes were, they were shown 6 pairs of images. These images were to either be static or active. The static images would be something like posing for a football picture or someone just standing on the sideline of a game. And then there would be active pictures. These active pictures would be a mid-game catch, something along those sorts, an active picture. They were then asked to describe these pictures in as much detail as they could. They kept track of how many times they were to use speech fillers like like, how much time they took between their thoughts, and how much tip of the tongue moments they have. Tip of the tongue moments being where you know the word, you know how to describe it, but you can't quite come across what that word is. After converting the results, they divided the amount of time they took divided by how long they actually spoke for. They noticed that there were a couple inconsistencies. When it came to gestures, it turns out that even those who could use those gestures actually didn't take the chance to use them. They didn't use it to their advantage. What stood out with this study was that people who could use gestures had a better time describing those static images I was talking about earlier than those who couldn't use hand gestures. This showed that even though they didn't use it to their advantage, having the opportunity to have them helped them come up with these ideas and get their point across better. This link between hand gestures and not having hand gestures was also shown in a smaller study with children. These children weren't necessarily given pictures, but they had to name certain things. The children who could use hand gestures described many more images perfectly as opposed to those who couldn't, showing that there is some sort of connection between hand gestures and speech production. So all in all, even though their first study showed that there wasn't really a connection, there was something there. There was just some sort of error in their way, like their weakness that they stated in their own study was that their picture description task, what they had to do, just didn't use it. It didn't involve enough mental state or mental power to necessitate gestures or not having gestures to be actually that important. So all in all, there does seem to be a link between hand gestures and language production. A way that we can use this link between them to our advantage is by using specific gestures in your speech when you rehearse it that you want to attach to a certain thought. Like, let's say you use steepling, something that we see a lot in political speeches. Let's say you want to tie that to a specific thought. When you practice, when you were to say that thought, you tie it to this hand motion so that when you're done thinking about it, you tie that hand motion to it now. All in all, there does seem to be a link between gestures and language production. A way we can use this link to our advantage is by tying a certain hand gesture to the actual thought. So when you're rehearsing your speech, you use, like saying, crossing your fingers, steepling. You tie that to a specific thought so that when you do your speech, you don't try not to forget as much because you use those certain hand motions to have a thought attached to them. Thank you for your time.